Welcome back to the Strain Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me,
I'm Hillary Weber.
And I'm Bertie Doyle.
Merry Christmas. Season's
Merry
greetings.
Christmas.
We are not currently dressed for Christmas this year.
No, I don't have a hat.
I don't have my little Santa hat. That's okay, because we have a more exciting guest to unwrap today as a present to all of you out there. Who is our guest today?
Well, our guest today is Mr. Stephen Demmler. He is a producer, writer. He has a really interesting family history of showbiz, but then has an interesting career that he's developed himself as well.
Yeah, and we won't spoil anything in the intro here because it is a really fascinating conversation. So we'll get right to it. With that, we'll be right back with our guest, Stephen Demmler. Welcome back to Loose Framing Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me now is our guest, Stephen Demmler. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How are you, Tyler?
I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. You are a filmmaker, financier. You have a really interesting past, just how you got to Tampa Bay. And we'll get into all that. But I wanted to start with just sort of growing up tangentially related to just the entertainment industry.
Sure.
Your dad was the prop master at SNL for how many years?
47 and a half.
That is amazing. Is he retired now, or is he still working?
Yeah, no, he's retired.
Okay.
I moved him down here because we needed a babysitter.
Thanks, Grandpa.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was a really, I mean, how many people get to say their dad was the prop master or even worked at SNL?
For sure. Yeah.
So what was that sort of like growing up in not necessarily a shadow, but just with that experience around you?
Yeah, it's the Demmlers have been stagehands for long before him too. So I think it's his great-grandfather was prop master at the Hippodrome in Manhattan back when it was the biggest theater in the world, and all the way, like my grandfather ran the hydraulics at Radio City Music Hall because it was aircraft carrier technology, and he was like the only, I don't know, Navy guy who was allowed to touch that stuff. So it's been all the way through, so it was just kind of natural. And for me, you know, we were in New York City, but so entertainment's a little more prevalent or whatever. So it didn't feel too strange, I think, until maybe late junior high or high school when, oh man, my wife's going to be like, why do you talk about this? But when girls were like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is cool.
I get some street cred for this.
Yeah. But it was, I mean, some of my earliest memories were my dad being on camera unwillingly, you know, when they cut to like bumper shots, or he also
they're pulling back and you see the cast running off to get to the next stage, and people are taking things down.
But he also, because it was on the same floor, he was prop master for SNL first, but then Studio 8H for NBC second. So even when SNL's dark, he was, you know, employed and ran that studio and that floor. So he did things like Rosie O'Donnell when she had her show, or Letterman when he was there. And what I'm referencing is some of my earliest memories about him doing props and being on camera are, there was a bit on David Letterman called like the mobile book librarian, where this woman came out and did some jokes, and a forklift with a bookshelf came out, and my dad was the only certified like forklift guy.
So he was the one on camera.
And he hated it. So he'd come out and he'd look so pissed and miserable, and Letterman loved that. So he would just shit all over my dad before they did the bit with the woman. And so I still call him Gus because of that, you know.
That's great.
30 years later.
Did you get a chance to, I mean, did your dad invite you on set? Was that something cool to come out and see the actual show on Saturday, or maybe the prep during the week?
Yeah, it was the only thing during the season. They work like 100 hours. It's really incredible.
Intense,
yeah, incredible. And so the only way to see him was to come to set. And so we have pictures when I was little, you know, like running around with all these cast members.
Yeah.
At that age, it was probably like Sandler and those guys were there, and we were small running around. Yeah. But
what cast did he start with?
Him?
Yeah.
Episode 1.
Okay, so he was there from the
He was there
beginning.
from the pilot. Yeah.
Wow.
Along with his two brothers. There's a story, I'll tell it. I don't know if it's true or not. Like, full disclosure, it's true in our family. And my cousin Eamon, who is now the prop master and took over from my dad, he'll know and he will correct me if I'm wrong. I assume is that before, like a couple nights before the first show, before anybody was sober, they were all out at a bar. My uncle, one of them, saw a lady he liked. It turns out that lady was with a man. They got in a quarrel. Man punched my uncle in the face. First episode of SNL. Turns out that man was Chevy Chase.
That's not the first time Chevy's punched someone, if I'm not
So
mistaken.
it's like everything tracks.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's true, I have no idea. It's just been told to me.
Just because it came out around the time we're recording this, there was the new trailer for the new SNL movie coming out. Did you get a chance to see it?
I saw the trailer, yeah.
Does that track with anything of your expectations?
Yeah. There's just so much that can be told that I'm interested to see like what it actually amounts to.
I think it's sort of a ticking clock style movie where it's 3 hours before they go live for the first show. So I like the premise behind it. I'm not quite sold on the casting yet. I'll have to actually see how it works out.
I for sure have thoughts.
Whoever they cast for Chevy Chase, since you brought him up, is a dead ringer.
Yeah.
I mean, just his mannerisms, his look, his voice. I'm not really sold on the John Belushi character yet.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
I'll give it a chance, but it looks fascinating.
Yeah.
So when did you start working at SNL?
Yeah, I think the first show I worked, I was in 10th or 11th grade. So probably before it was legal, just based on labor laws. But however old I was, what I went and did was I caught cue cards for in that business. There's this guy Wally who's he runs that and is kind of famous. He's in a lot of sketches they've put him in over the years, and so catching cue cards amounted to me standing beneath him like this and him just flicking these cue cards in and trying to catch them, and they're thick, so like you get chopped, and so I just stood there and had cards thrown in my face for a whole season.
How glamorous film
it was
is.
really it was glitzy. So I did that first for about a year, and then I moved on to there's two families with a lot of people there. The stage crew's run by this guy Joe Riley, and he has 97 children, I assume, on the crew.
Yeah,
all of whom I love equally. If they see this.
Very New York Union.
For sure.
Yeah.
So then I moved on to stage crew, just moving, like the update desk and whatever. And eventually, once I graduated high school, I was on my dad's crew on props. And would fly back and forth because I did undergrad in West Palm Beach, and I would fly up Thursday nights and do the show, work the show Friday night, Saturday, fly back Sunday because it paid better than some horrible server job downtown West Palm.
I worked for NTV down in Miami Beach, and that was like you're making $3 an hour.
Yeah.
Like it was terrible. So I would definitely take the SNL job. Were the Saturday night rap parties as legendary as what everyone says they are?
Once they started letting me into them, they were great. Yeah. But I worked for a number of years where everybody went, and I was like, "Can I get in?" They're like, "No, you're 17." So I missed a bunch of really cool ones. And unfortunately, I missed the 40th anniversary one where Prince played and just was amazing. I got to miss that one. But
what is just the tension immediately evaporate once they go live, or is it like right up until the cast comes out, take their bow? Is it just madness?
It's controlled chaos. Yeah, it's really, it takes a few shows to settle in, and for you to understand that time moves a lot slower than it feels like it moves. Because the stage manager when I was there, Chris Kelly, would yell like 30 seconds. And at the beginning, I was like, oh my God, we only have 30 seconds. And somebody would walk by with a prop that's supposed to be set on the other side. And like,
just casually,
I imagine him smoking. He for sure wasn't, but like smoking a cigarette, taking his time to get there. And over time that settles in. And it is like, if you see the bumper shots, everybody's running around, but it's the most finely tuned chaotic machine I've ever seen.
I won't ask you if there was a particularly terrible host, but do you have a memorable host?
My favorite host, I think John Hamm has been, he's so fun to work with.
6 times now or 5 times. He's up there.
He's definitely, I think he's in the 5-timers.
I think he's one of the most underutilized actors in Hollywood. He's got dramatic chops, but comedy wise, dude has timing. Like he just knocks it out of the park.
He can
every time.
do anything he wants. There was one sketch called Ham and Bubbly. It was him and Michael Bublé. They opened a champagne and ham bar together, where it was just like different champagne stuff with chunks of ham in it. But the gag was they were doing like a commercial, so he was speaking to camera, and you think he's just advertising, and then Bublé comes out to sing, and it turns out John Hamm is playing John Hamm, and he's holding Michael Bublé captive, forcing him to do this. And it was just a funny. I love that sketch.
I don't remember that one. So. Grew up, you're not just your dad, but going back a generation, working in film and entertainment, stagehands. How does someone with that sort of past, that sort of gravity pulling you towards an industry like that, end up going into financing?
I should say my mom was a Rockette for 26 years too. Like
So
a
that's
dancer.
doubly so then.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's very much a family thing.
Were you just the oddball out?
No, I think I was talking with my wife about this recently. I can remember writing like Star Wars scripts like by hand because laptops weren't a thing when I was a kid. That old.
So am I.
Yeah. So I'd always like writing, especially like I've always wanted to write, like, and it was just there. However, because I'm exposed to all these people in this business, not a lot of shows are on for 50 seasons.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And not a lot of theater, right? Like Radio City is on since the 30s consistently every year and the same kind of thing. So although my parents and upbringing was really stable because both of them happened to have found like the unicorn jobs in their field, I was around a lot of people who weren't. And so I chickened out is what I've, and we'll come to how I've kind of tried to rectify that lately, but I really chickened out and was like, I want to do something different. I didn't know it was finance.
Yeah.
I think in undergrad, I was like a music production major, I was a business major. I failed scuba at one point. I took scuba and failed that. Which how do you do?
Not drown? That's the only objective.
Yeah. Once they resuscitated me, the professor was like, "You got an F," and I was like, "Ah, shit." Yeah, and I just kind of found my way to it because it was a way to be in the finance I'm in, which is like deal structuring.
Yep.
It's the most creative finance can be. It's still not super creative, but the most creative finance can be, and so it kind of drew me to it. And maybe having food and shelter consistently was really appealing.
It's funny you bring that up. A mutual friend of ours, Tony, who I'm sure we'll have on the podcast at some point. He has a friend here in Tampa Bay, a guy named Dr. Nucci.
Okay.
He owns, he's like one of the big spine surgeons here in town, right? But he went to NYU Tisch, graduated with a degree in film, and he found becoming a spine surgeon easier than breaking into the film industry.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And then later in life, he started investing in films.
Sure.
I mean, there's so many stories of people who go to film school and it's like, ooh, this is fun, but there's no stability here.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, no one gets those, 10 season.
Yeah.
Right.
That's pretty incredible.
Break your spine, hauling stuff back and forth. But yeah, it's a gig industry. So I totally understand. I wouldn't even say chickening out, just latching on a stability.
Yeah.
Like I want to pay my bills. I want to have some floor to stand on, right?
Sure.
And not just have it fall out from underneath us. Okay, so you graduated from NYU in a degree in financing.
Global finance.
Global financing, right? And then you went over to the University of Singapore too, right?
Hong Kong University of Science
There you
and
go.
Technology.
And you're now back at NYU in their writing program.
I am.
Just a glutton for punishment.
Just, an idiot. Well, so we can jump around, but I started Talon because I was like, this is my way to leverage the finance career to get into entertainment, and then I can sneak in my creative aspirations. Because I've been writing for myself for years, and some of that's online and like short form places, whatever. And I had some success, on the entertainment finance side. And I told this one particular CAA media finance guy, I was like, will you read this script I wrote? And his eyes glazed over. And I could hear his thoughts. He's like, the fucking Monopoly man wants me to read his scribblings. And I was like, oh, nobody cares. The credibility here doesn't confer it over here. Yeah. So what can I do? And I was like, a third of these people have NYU degrees. I should try that.
Leverage that.
Yeah. And, the dramatic writing program, MFA at NYU, is within its sphere, like a legendary kind of place. From Tony Kushner to even, like Donald Glover, to non-film people like Suzanne Collins, who wrote Hunger Games. Like, they're all graduates from that. So, and I like that program does, you write film, TV, and stage, unlike other top tier places that are just film or TV focused. And for some reason, I was like, I'll write a play to get in. And I've never done that.
Clearly it worked.
And I got waitlisted, which is going to be my chip on my shoulder. I got waitlisted, and then, I wound up getting in, I think I was one person after me on the wait list also got in. And it's been great so far, but I'm in this cohort now with it's a 24 person cohort. There's 2 or 3 wonderful people approximately my age, and then 21 wonderful people much younger.
Yeah.
And that's why I said I chickened out, is because some of the younger group, they're so talented and they're doing it, they're all so smart. So they get like how difficult it is, and like the financial challenges of making it happen, but they're going for it. And it's really, it's been like an inspiring
That's going to
thing.
be gratifying then on the financing side, because there is all these talented people, but how many times do they get opportunities to actually make something? And it's finding someone that one believes in what their product is and having the financial wisdom to be able to pull the pieces together to make it happen.
Yeah. And so like I'm there for two reasons, really. One, for me to get that credibility, but also to refine. Like I think in 1 year I thought I was good before, but now I feel much stronger because of the cohort, because of the professors. Like it's an amazing program. But also, as you know, while we were in Cannes, I brought a couple of them to Cannes and kind of sponsored them to come and help stand them up. And yesterday I asked one of them if I could option something she wrote to try and produce it and stand it up. And so it's been this thing where it's edifying for me creatively. It's giving me kind of creative credibility. Within the first year there, I got signed at 3 Arts Entertainment as a writer and a producer with 2 incredible managers. But also I have this pool of talent that NYU did the job of screening and selecting, and then I spend a year so far and 1 more year coming up.
Yeah, and that's got to be exciting to be on the ground floor, not only with your own concepts and work, but find these creative people and like, oh, I could be the one to light this person's fire, and then
for sure
go on the upward trajectory with them.
Yeah, that's exactly. And if you look at successful producers and production companies, that happens regularly, right? Like somebody's takes off, and they have a team that enables them to do their thing, and they stay that way. Because this is true in any business, but it feels maybe especially potent in this. Like, it's hard to find good people, and once you do, like, latch on.
Very true. So in between, you worked at Citigroup for a while, right?
Yeah, a long while.
10 years almost? I mean, how long were you there?
I was at Citigroup for 5 but years, I did finance for about 14.
So, I mean, finance in general is always risky. You try to mitigate it as much as you can. But, most people would say film is an incredibly risky asset to invest in. So what did you take from your experience working for Citi and then translate that over into film financing?
Risk management, and then self-control maybe is the other answer. And it's really just a matter of the way I traded, or the way the teams I were on structured different deals or worked, or just even projects we funded. We're always really intelligent. Like, we have this many dollars, this is what we can risk, and here are the range of outcomes. And if we lose it all, we're not out of the game, basically. And so it's similar here. A good example of that is the first film that Talon took the lead on and was like the full finance, the primary financier for, was Bookworm. It's like father-daughter adventure comedy with Elijah Wood. That'll come out October 15th in the US in theaters, and was just voted audience favorite at Fantasia Fest this year that it opened. It's a $5 million US budget, shot entirely in New Zealand. However, there's all these buckets of funding in New Zealand that we don't have here in the US. And a couple, that we were eligible for. We managed to get all of them because we got some exceptions for Elijah Wood being an honorary Kiwi, because most of them are for natives. But Frodo's a native. And so that $5 million budget was a net $1 million US budget for the world ex Australia and New Zealand. That's kind of cordoned off for those, to repay those buckets. And so like making it simple and ignoring some details, right? Like at a high level, it was, can Toby Harvard, this incredible writer, and Ant Timpson, this incredible director, and Elijah Wood and Nell Fisher make a film that's worth more than $1 million everywhere in the world except Australia and New Zealand? And like at base, that's the bet we're making. And we said, yeah. But that's how we structure things. We look for as much soft money, or, like, just is the package as flexible as possible to hit its goal.
So with creative background and just knowledge of the film industry, what are you looking for when you look at a project, other than just, hey, can I make a return on my investment on this? So what are the creative blocks or elements that you look for?
Yeah. Well, because I write so much, really for any project we've invested in, I've read the script and been like, this is a good script. And I enjoy that. Like, I see the creative merit and am interested in the story, interested in the filmmaker. Because film's so tough. Like, if I'm going to get punched in the face repeatedly, which is how this business feels, like every day is just a punch in the face. I want to be doing it for a project I care about, or like think is other people will enjoy, or have some sort of catharsis, or just feel moved by. So that's where it starts. And if I like that, then I worry about all the finance stuff. but that's very much second. Both are requirements, right? But I don't even bother with that if I don't like the script.
Yeah. Are you usually on the attachment side too, trying to pull in the talent and the
Recently,
directors?
so as many probably know watching this, like you don't really get to start there. You get to come in late to start, and then you move that way. So for Bookworm, for example, that was all built. There's a great Emma Slade's this amazing like Kiwi producer. That whole product was built, and it was just, can we have the money? And I decided yes. So we've done a few of those. Like we did O Canada with Paul Schrader, Jacob Elordi, Richard Gere,
which is why you were at Cannes.
which premiered at Cannes while we were there, and we'll be at Toronto and where else? New York Film Festival, and I guess it's in public now. It was announced yesterday. We sold it to Kino Lorber. We just financed that, and we're along for the ride because again, with the economics made sense. However, we're doing one now called The White Horse. It's this really incredible little horror film, and we've partnered with SpectreVision, and that's us sitting on Zooms with SpectreVision and the writer-director thinking up who should be in, and then I've been working with WME, who represents me now too, and we're sending, I can't say who, right? But we've made offers to cast. And so I've slowly moved us, like once they believed I had good taste, and once they believed like checks were real, and then they believed like knew how to produce and write, now we've garnered some trust to speak to actors, right? Speak to talent, because that's what everybody guards the most, because that's that's the cash value of any project, is whose face is on screen most of the time. So you don't get to do that at a high level, at least with the people we're going to, until you've earned it.
Speaking of cash value and just how you make a return in this business now, I mean, statistics right now, 40% fewer productions today, pre-pandemic, 20% from pre-strike last year. Overall streaming service purchases, I think, were down 19% this year. MGs have been crushed to the lowest they've ever been, minimum guarantees for the purchase prices. So where is the money coming in these days? I mean, how are you cobbling this together to actually, is it all just debt financing and figuring out how to maximize incentives, or are there still streamers out there spending big money for product?
To stand the films up? Yeah, sure. Well, there are others who probably do it different, but I'm still quite small. And even, our partners where I'm on the board at SpectreVision, and Elijah Wood and Daniel Noah and Lawrence Ingley's production company, they've been around 13 years, but they're still niche, right? They're great, but they're still niche. So for us, it's really two ways, and it's cobbling together soft money as much as we can from incentives and whatever other deals we can make to kind of lower that. And then indie financiers, so individuals, small investment funds, maybe like the smaller film funds, or that are writing like $250,000, $500,000, $750,000 checks, kind of, and cobbling. And for me, it's sticking within a well-defined range. Like if we're gross budgets between $3 and $5 million, we can get the incentive down to where there's like $2 million, $3 million bucks that need to be raised and at risk, and then it's part Talon, part individual investors. And the way we can bring individual investors in is Talon usually takes a lead position first, so we can attach meaningful cast, and then we go to the individual. So they're not just investing in an idea. They're saying, okay, you've got some elements in place. The full team.
Risk mitigation's already there.
The full team's there. These are the names. Come for the ride. We'll do our best. And like it's structured to where none of these projects could go to zero. They could, but it's highly unlikely they go to zero, right? So somebody puts in $500,000. We're not talking about a $500,000 loss. Maybe they lose $250,000 if it goes bad, But so we're structuring like that. A group like SpectreVision, which is still indie, but a tier up from me in size or whatever, they have the ability to do everything I just said for me, but they can also call Neon or A24 and say, we have this horror film. If you finance it, we'll produce it. Two good brands. And so they can take that route, which is a bit outside the box of what I'm myself doing. But that is something I'm a part of through them.
Find the soft money at the indie level, they're less interested in the ROI and more in just attaching themselves to an interesting, fun project?
Some people. I wouldn't say I've met anybody who just doesn't care.
Yeah,
if the cash comes
so
back.
Wealthy, they don't care about it. Like, here's some,
Yeah, those people probably exist, and I would love to meet them.
If you find them, let me know.
We can put my email up for anybody to email me tips on who those people are. That said, that is a large part of it, right? Like the people who are these investors either fancy themselves producers and are doing what I did, right? And building their track record to do more and take a lead position, or it's diversification, right? They have, I don't know, a chain of 45 Domino's and want some cash elsewhere that's not correlated to Domino's performance. So they kick a little this way, and it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at lots of businesses and you can diversify a lot of ways, but not all of them let you
Not
go to red carpet premieres
and
some of the fun
story
stuff.
At the end of
it is more fun.
So Talon's not only into investing in films, but you also have a major stake in studios.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about what's going on, because you have Coastal Creative here you're loosely attached to, and then you have your brand new studio facilities coming up in Dallas.
Yeah. So that's just being opportunistic. It was never the plan, but we're a quarter partner in Coastal Creative in St. Pete. Just because it's an incredible facility, and Zach, who runs it, I think is maybe the most tenacious person I've met ever.
He's so talk about hustle.
He's just so hardworking that I asked him to take days off for his health. But he's just that committed, right? And I want to support that. But Dallas is a whole other thing. Like Coastal Creative is our nice local spot. Dallas is an 11-acre film studio where they've shot Queen of the South, Dallas the Reboot, and The Chosen, some of it there. And it's this parcel that had existed. It was a cotton distribution facility in the 60s, so it's been around a long time. But somewhere in the 90s was repurposed into a film studio, and it didn't go well. The reason it didn't go well, among others, is whoever bought it decided we need a water tower. Warner Brothers. So we built one. It's non-functioning. That's it. And then they went bankrupt. And it was, so this parcel wound up in a property developer's portfolio for like 20 years, and just as a part of land he was acquiring. But it still shot stuff because Dallas had 0 other facilities. And so I heard about it. I went and I met the owner and said, why don't we do this together? I'll be in charge of paying to renovate it. I'll be in charge of staffing it and filling it. You bring the property to the deal, and we'll do it together. And he's been the dream partner on it so far.
And I think large part Tyler Sheridan, but also just Texas reinvesting in film. They are definitely one of those states that are sparking off right now, like Oklahoma, New Mexico. You look at a state like Florida, but it has no statewide incentive. Is that a huge deterrent from productions coming to Florida? And how much so as a financier?
Absolutely. So I'm desperate to not be away from my kids as much as I am. And if somebody brings me a film and they're like, we want to shoot in Florida, I'm kind of forcing me to be like, sorry, bro, I can't do it. Because we're talking about, I'm going to say $10 million so I don't screw up my math on camera. But if it's a $10 million project in Texas, I get 22.5%. I know immediately it's not a $10 million project. It's a $7.75 million project. Here it's $10 million. So it's just more expensive by $2 million to shoot here.
You just can't make the math work.
And you put Long Legs just outperformed Furiosa. And Furiosa got great reviews and I don't know, 1 billion minute standing ovation in Cannes, which I don't understand that whole thing. But I don't want to be dependent on the whims of what people connect to or not, because who can get that, right? So my primary job is make it cost as little as the right amount still, but as little as possible. And Florida just does nothing statewide, at least, to help us do that.
They don't. I mean, we're the only state in the Southeast that doesn't have an incentive. We're one of only 5 states in the entire United States that doesn't have an incentive, and it just doesn't make any sense.
And one of the largest standalone economies in the world.
Right. And think of just the biodiversity across the state that people could be tapping into for actually exterior locations. All going to waste. So it's a shame.
And a sneaky, talented crew base too. If we could bring projects here, and the few things we have managed to make work here, nobody's ever come back and been like, well, we can't because the crew's not talented, right? Because they are.
People forget that we were the 3rd largest filming destination in the world up until 2015, 2014.
Right.
And a lot of that crew is still here. Now, we've lost a lot through attrition moving elsewhere, but there's still a lot of them still here that you can tap into, particularly in like the Orlando, Tampa, and Miami areas where we were always the production hubs. So you're right. There is a very sneaky underground crew. I shouldn't even say underground. They work in commercials now.
They find a way to be busy, but it's not in film. It's not in narrative.
But when narratives do come here, whether you can afford them or not, that's another thing, because commercials pay a lot more, but there is really good crew here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like Florida and Texas, it does have an incentive, but it's just not nearly as competitive as it can be, because I think they're the 13th largest economy in the world. and the filmmakers from Texas love Texas. That's their home. They want to come back.
Yeah.
Tyler Sheridan's a great example. He just, through sheer grit and will and being incredibly talented, said, like, we shoot in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And once he was successful, Paramount will do whatever he asks. Like, they will shoot wherever he feels like shooting. And him, very intelligently, they shoot on his properties.
Yes,
right? So
I'm
there's
sure.
that.
And there's not a whole lot of people that have that kind of clout anymore, really.
No, not at all. But if Florida if there was an incentive and we could bring stuff here, I bet filmmakers would come back because it's like an incredible place to live.
It is. That's one of the reasons we had Tim Burton come back to shoot Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. One, he was one of those directors that had the clout to say,
right,
we don't care, we're going to film here.
Yeah.
But even though they were filming in the Gibsonton Sun City Center area,
Sure.
which we'll talk about where you live in a
sure.
bit,
Yeah.
he wanted to come because he wanted to stay at the Don Cesar,
Yeah.
right on the beach in the penthouse
It's
while
so
they were
nice.
filming for 3 months.
Yeah.
And that was enough to say we're shooting here because there was no other reason for them to come here. There really wasn't.
Yeah.
They could have found the homes. We have interesting homes over in the Gibson area, but we could have found that anywhere.
Sure.
It was literally just the atmosphere of Florida he wanted to come back to. So, how did you get back to the Tampa Bay area since we brought that up?
Yeah, sure. When I finished the first fund I was at, I wanted to try something different. I got into the global corporate strategy team at MGM in Las Vegas for their MGM Resorts like corporate entity. And then wound up trading in North Carolina. And then we had my son and my first child, and we decided he shouldn't grow up in Las Vegas. We don't need him to have a card counting and cocaine problem by preschool. So we tried North Carolina. I think my wife liked it more than me. I hated Durham. I'm from Manhattan, so it just wasn't my speed. And so we decided to move again, and I pitched New York City, and my wife is from Boca. She decided Florida.
Yeah.
And then we together were like, well, Boca and West Palm are like really expensive now, and Tampa is gorgeous. It's the same, but at the time, at least, it was much cheaper than those places.
Yeah.
So I think I came once during college, maybe. We just kind of took a shot in the dark. I found a home online and just rented it without ever seeing it and moved down.
And you're on the east side of Tampa too. You're over in the Gibsonton,
Riverview, technically. Yeah. We bought a home. We've since bought a home in Riverview, but where we rented was in Riverview, Gibsonton, right on, like a street apart from those two.
Which, for those who don't know, Gibsonton is famously the carny capital. I think that's probably the wrong word. I just got canceled right there. The former circus performer retirement area, where a lot of the Ringling Brothers performers ended up moving to, and it's the most bizarre little town. Because one, they have like it's actually called the Circus Performer Museum, whatever it is, Independent Showman. And it used to be called I won't even say the word. Never mind. Because I'll definitely will be canceled. But it was the old sideshow attractions. Let's put it that way. But a lot of these circus performers brought their stuff with them. So like you'll be driving around and there'll be a double wide with a trapeze behind it, or there's a Ferris wheel for some reason rotting in someone's backyard. Yeah. It's a really surreal place.
Yeah. To go back to shooting stuff in Florida, we have stories too. Like there's so much local stuff that we could write and shoot here because it happened here, right? Like there's so much.
And not just the typical Florida man did, meth and wrestled an alligator.
Although we have all that
too. We do,
we have all that
there's a lot of really interesting and
it's a really surprisingly diverse slate of stories that could be told here by local filmmakers too, or not, whatever, but we don't get the chance because of the state incentive situation.
So looking, just prognosticating into the future, I mean, do you see... You mentioned indies, then let's say 3 to 5 million, and then you have the $100+ million Deadpools, right?
Yeah.
But do you see the industry bending back towards those mid-size $10 to $25 million films, what you used to see in the 80s, and that sort of disappeared?
I don't know. I think I do see it trending towards some of those types of films, like an R-rated comedy or something like that, but for today or whatever. But I don't know that I see them being made for that amount anymore. I think it's hard to see. It's polarizing, right? So like projects are shifting towards the spectrum. Either they're made very cheap, like on the end I work, or they're made for way more maybe than they should because the studios are doing it. And that middle ground, like that middle level of company and financier, the economics for how things are right now just don't work.
So you just saw Sony announce that they were buying Alamo Drafthouse.
From a business partner of mine.
Netflix is opening their own theater chains. Do you see studios and streaming services moving back to the vertical integration model where they're going to have their own their own theaters? They premiere it a weekend and then it goes right to streaming.
Well, take Sony for example, because I'm wearing the hat. Go Mutant. I looked at the camera. So Tim League and SpectraVision and I helped reform Mondo into this new pop culture collective becoming Mutant. But Tim founded Alamo Drafthouse, and so he just sold it to Sony. So I've been talking to him a little bit about that. And I think that's what it is, because less popular in the news articles is that Sony also bought from Tim in that same deal Fantastic Fest.
Yep.
So they have theaters and a festival to premiere their genre stuff at, and Alamo is...
Yeah,
it does a lot, but it lends itself to more
get that
genre
opening weekend boost for the marketing, and then they can roll it right into their streaming services.
Yeah, so it's really creative. So I do see, I don't know if it's a trend that is going to keep happening or not, but I do see at least it could become one, right? Like some of the big players are trying it out again. And I'm maybe not that, but I'm trying to recreate it on a small scale, right? Like we now have a studio, we have the ability to generate content, we have the ability to produce it through Mutant, we have the ability to market it, in a much smaller way, but it makes sense to be able to do that. I'm trying to bring a kind of a non-Tyler Sheridan, but equally famous filmmaker who's from Dallas. I'm trying to bring him to the studio right now because he's amazing and he's one of my favorite working directors, but because not only can I help finance and produce the film, I can wield the studio creatively and say like, okay, this is our rate, but instead of 30 shoot days, you can have 45 because I can take that rate, and I can be creative with it.
So with that in mind, you have a shoot you were able to bring to Tampa that's actually scouting right now as we're recording this called The Feather Detectives.
Yeah.
You can give us just a quick elevator pitch for what the project is?
Yeah, well, I do want to say how it came together too, is because that's part of how it's possible. Is a wildly talented writer from the program, a graduate of the program in NYU, wrote a pilot that won a large grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation because the project is science-y, which they'd like, and then also won some cash from Film Independent. So I partnered with a producer named Kate Stahl, and it's a 30-minute or so pilot. It's a dramedy, like comedy drama. Slash procedural set in the 1960s about this woman who worked in the FAA and in the Smithsonian, basically, like the way I say it, is solving crimes with birds. And it's incredible. It's based on a true story, based on a true person, and is incredibly unique and just really intelligently written. But the economics of it work because we were able to win these grants, right? So we're not depending on financiers. Talon's like covering a gap or whatever. We're partnering with you guys in Tampa has helped cover, through its incentive program, has helped make it possible to shoot here. Because even without it, like we were off by a sizable amount. So with the support, we've been able to come here, and we're going to shoot 8 or 9 days, almost entirely in Tampa. We found a director that has a bunch of South by Southwest projects. Really, Amy Omar, incredibly talented. And we'll put it together and see what happens. Yeah, but we're gonna. It
is a fun story. As soon as you sent me the script over, I was like, this can't be real. I mean,
it's true.
Sorry. And I looked it up and it's like, this woman helped solve, what was it, like a 747 or something, crashed outside of DC. And the FAA, she was working at the Smithsonian at the time. And they're like, we don't understand. All we found was feathers around the remains of the engine. And she came in and figured out that it was this bird strike, essentially, that brought it down. And before that, they couldn't imagine that a bunch of birds could take down that large of a jet.
It's something we know now, like because of her, right? But it's also one of those things to talk about, like why the project makes sense is, and why I gravitate towards genre and niche so much is that the birding community is huge and sticky, right? So economically, we're making it for cheap because of the grants, and at minimum, we're playing to a community that knows who this woman is. She's a rock star in that community, and it's a sticky fan base. So, we're catering to something small. It could hit larger. Who knows?
Well, you add in that procedural element, and now there's people who are in crime drama.
It's repeatable, makes sense. And it just kind of put together very well. And I like that idea where we start with like an addressable group that I understand instead of saying people like comedy, and it's so broad, you don't know who you're really serving. So we're making this for that community. And if we do a good job, and that's why Amy's our director. She knows how to make human, meaningful, like true things.
Yeah.
Then it should be like so specific. It's universal, and maybe it has legs.
Yeah, and you're activating the University of Tampa as a location. Which I mean, talk about bizarre locations. We were talking before we started rolling. You look at the architecture of University of Tampa. That should not exist in Florida.
Yeah.
Right. It looks like it's right out of St. Petersburg.
It doesn't exist anywhere else.
It doesn't.
In Florida.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
And then you needed some 1960s mod style, mid-century modern homes. We have those here in town. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's not Everglades and Mickey Mouse.
Right. And people don't realize that, but we're very confident about our locations, and we are shooting a project that takes place in 1960s Washington, D.C. in Tampa, Florida. Right. And nobody will know. We might have to paint out a palm tree or two. Right. Which actually, Kate, my partner on this, and I joke, like, our biggest problem is palm trees. Yeah. And that's it. Otherwise, we've found everything we need. And it's gorgeous and amazing. And the other nice thing about here versus if you're shooting something in LA, right, is the people around town here are excited to be a part of it. There's an appetite. Right. They're not jaded. They're excited to be a part of it and pitch in, right? Which is so refreshing if you're making films.
You go to LA or even New York, you know,
for sure.
If your storefront's in the background, you better have money to right there.
And a lot of it too. And that's what's strange is in places you don't think that's also true. I just got back from a location scout in Amman, Jordan. And even there, which is, less shoots there, obviously. But even there, people are like, can I be in this? Like, maybe it's not money, but they're like, you can't shoot from my store unless I'm in this movie. And you're like, okay, that's nice. But it was very serious about getting paper signed. Like, you can't open it. You can't close it during these times. Whereas here, there's a little more like communal support.
I think people are excited. I mean,
think so.
As many commercials we have, we are one of the largest commercial destinations in the Southeast, but features are still rare here. And not just in Tampa, but I think in Florida at large. So people come and say, oh, wow, there's a TV pilot shooting. Like, I can be a part of this. You can use my house. Sure. And yes, you're losing whatever the incentive money is you could be getting in, somewhere else, like Georgia. But there is a bit of an offset just in the enthusiasm of the community to allow you into spaces at either no cost or relatively low cost. Which,
for like a Bad Boys movie might not matter because they have enough money and they've made the choice. Like, we don't care about the incentive because we need A, B,
you're
C.
under $3 million.
If you're shooting something the size I do, that matters. Like the help from the community, the willingness of the team to like believe they're a part of it and help make them a part of it. Right. It matters as opposed to just like clock in, clock out. For a big studio project.
So going back to just not studios or not studio projects, but studios in general.
Sure.
You've also invested in LED volume technology, both at Coastal Creative. I'm sure it's part of your plans at some stage in Dallas. Do you still, how do I want to phrase this? Was that hype during the pandemic that was like, oh, we need to figure out a way to shoot this with smaller crew? Or do you think that's going to continue to evolve and become more of a part of film going forward?
I have a terrible analogy for this. If you remember CrossFit, it didn't exist, and then it was on every other corner, and every person who went said, like, if you don't do this, you're going to die young and really unhealthy. And then 2 years later, there were a lot less CrossFits. But it's still here, and it's a perfectly valid and sustainable thing, right? That's how I feel about it. Is it exploded given the conditions of the pandemic when it just solved a lot of problems we had. And now it's contracted because it does solve a lot of problems. The technology will keep getting better. If you remember when we were young, right? Like a 55-inch flat screen TV costs like $7,000. Now they're $500 at Costco. The LED volumes will cost less too. That's a commodity and it will come down in price. So I think they're a key component that will be a part of film from here on out. They're going to get cooler and more capable and better. But I can't see a day in the near future, at least, where they replace filming on locations all the time, right? Like it's
so the technology of the actual volume walls themselves. I think you're absolutely right. It has been crashing as far as costs. I mean, it's been coming way down. But I think there was an initial idea that we can save a lot of money by getting rid of these crew and replacing them with these people. And I've seen those technical people that are creating the 3D engines and whatever it is and burning the assets, those prices have been steadily going up and up and up for them. Do you think it's a wash as far as what the initial thought of savings would be?
I think it's pretty close. I think maybe people underestimated how hard it is to make it look
Real.
Like real, truly real. And that's the worst thing in a movie, when your CGI and VFX stuff doesn't look quite real. Like the Cats movie, before, when the first trailer came out, people looked at it and they're like, the hell is this? Like something feels uncomfortable when it's done wrong. And I think it's art, right? Like, it's graphics or VFX, but those people are artists. So to find the level of caliber of artists you need to make it look real should be expensive, because not everybody can do it. It takes time and practice and effort and just some innate skill too. So I don't know if it's dollar to dollar a wash, but it's got to be close.
Yeah.
And in some cases it's more expensive, right?
It certainly is. Well, and still rentals are outrageously expensive for the top build LED volume studios.
Yeah.
They're as much as $45,000 a day in some cases, I've seen. So that's way out of most people's budgets.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I think people didn't understand the technology. Like, we can just take plate shots and put them. That doesn't work that way. Like, it needs to be parabolic. It needs to move with the camera. Otherwise, the illusion is broken the minute you move the camera.
Yeah, and so to pat Zach at Coastal Creative on the back, he's got I'm gonna mess up the wall dimensions, and I built it. Approximately 18 feet high by 36, 38 feet wide kind of wall.
I think it's taller than that. I think it might be 22. I could be wrong. Yeah.
You're probably right, which is embarrassing for me. But he uses it for so many things. He's hosted esport tournaments there. I produced a theater event with him there where myself and 3 other writers wrote 3 15-minute plays, and we used that as a theatrical backdrop, and then we set designed in front of it and did stage, right? Like we did theater there. So he's using it for commercials, he's using it for marketing and promos, but he's also figuring out like, what other cool things can we do with this? We hosted the Roger Deakins event there, right? And just turned it into a screening room.
They did their big comedy fest last year.
Yeah.
The Patrick Wilson's band used it to shoot like a music video promo with the background. Yeah. So he's definitely activating it.
Yeah. Which, as prices on rentals come down because that tech is commoditized and more available, the people like Zach who understand it can be used other ways too, they're going to be the ones who are okay, right? And as he's doing that, he's also pushing himself to the forefront of what can be done on it. And so he just has an edge there too. You know what I mean? To solve like what problems can it solve, and what problems has he learned? Not to pitch it on.
On the purchase and acquisition side, you've got a product you've made. What do you see streamers looking for right now? I mean, is it still like we're looking for the horror niche stuff, or is it more broad?
Oh well, my experience, right? Because it's limited to the things I've done so far. Genre makes sense, like will always work because they like birding. They have sticky fans, right? And they have a built-in community who are horror people, just like horror conventions around the country are like incredibly well attended, or Comic-Con, right? We're about to have one here. So I think they look for that, but the problem is prices are come down, and they move with the economy or whatever. So if you're making something and the financial structure is wrong, it doesn't matter if they love sci-fi or love horror. They're going to pay what they're going to pay. And then also a thing I learned very early was what they're looking at, right? And I'm simplifying a little bit, right? But basically, if you have a film with like a clear lead and then 2 supporting who are but still very prominent in a project, let's say, there's been one move people have tried have been like, we're going to cast the lead cheap because we'd have to pay them the most, and give somebody new, and we'll stunt cast the other 2, and that'll work. And the streamers, whoever, will tell you no. Like whoever's face is on the poster is all people care about, and that's what we're paying for.
It's the old blockbuster model, right? I mean, it doesn't matter as long as someone's walking from A to Z and they see a face they like. They're going to click.
So you have like when you're working to build a project, you have to get the most saleable and creatively correct. Like that's the matrix you're trying to work on. Who is like right for the role and also gives the most upside to the sale. And accept that it might not be certain people. And if you want to be responsible to your investors into the project, like you have to give up, maybe you go with your B choice instead of your A choice because they're more saleable, but can still crush the creative.
Do you think streaming services have become too niche in their diversity? I mean, you have from Shudder to whatever, but they're so focused on a very narrow audience that they don't have the purchasing power because they don't have the subscriptions behind them to really prop up
I think
films.
Those will be consolidated over time. That industry is a lot like newspapers, right? Where like the big ones got bigger and bigger and bigger and more prevalent and kind of have a place of prominence. but the small ones never really went away.
Yeah.
And then there was a time in the, I don't know, 15 years ago now, God, I'm so old, where people like Warren Buffett and Jeff Bezos were buying up a lot of local because they thought people would turn to local because the larger was prevalent. And that never really panned out financially the way they wanted, which leads me to believe like the small ones will eventually they'll exist, but be under the corporate umbrella of something larger and then be kind of pieces in that puzzle.
So, I mean, how many times you've been to Cannes? I'm assuming more than this wasn't your first. Yeah, a few times.
My first year.
And I don't know how much time you've spent in the Marché, but it always feels like people are chasing the tail of the dragon as part of the head of the dragon, and it's obviously hard to find the head, and you don't even know it's there sometimes. But you go there and you see a popular movie that was popular 2 years ago, and just the time it takes to make a movie. Right. 2 years later, now all of a sudden you have a glut of all these similar films. Should filmmakers, particularly people just looking to invest from your own background, stay away from those sort of gimmicky films or people that are coming up? Oh, well, this was popular last year. We're making this movie. I mean, is that a bad move?
I think, well, yes and no. I think if you're a younger writer trying to get representation or get something made or prove you can do what you say you can do, you know, can prove you're a writer, you can write that and get that in front of producers much faster than the time it takes to make a movie, right? Like that has to be done first. So I think there's some value there in having that as a presentation piece about your skill and your portfolio. So I think that's valuable. But I think if you're the producer putting the film together, ultimately wanting to sell it, if you walk through the Marché and see all of these things, you missed it. It's like a piece of investment advice. Like if you open up the Wall Street Journal and it says like, you should buy Amazon, you missed it. Don't buy Amazon today because they're already reporting about it. You missed the boat. And it's so similar there. I think what the producers need to do is figure out like, what do they care about creatively? What resonates creatively? And then can they make it economically? And if so, do it and make it amazing. And that maximizes their chances. And then there's a lot out of their hands, right? Like, let's say I'm wrong and you see a bunch of action movies. So you make an action movie in the same vein. 2 years later, it's still very popular, but a recession hit. So now nobody can buy it. Like you don't know, right? So the job is to make really good creative stuff in a financially responsible way and then pray to whoever you pray to that it works when it comes out.
And then last thing before we start wrapping this up, just because we were both at Cannes, is there still value in going through the tiered film festivals, or is that boat sort of sailed?
No, I think there's value. I think what I've learned, and being in this cohort at NYU with a younger group has really helped me understand this, is that not everyone understands, or at least shares my opinion, maybe understands is wrong, but the value of certain film festivals, and different film festivals do have different values, right? Like your Cannes or your Sundance, your Telluride, Toronto, a lot of the markets, right? And there's a tier where if your film gets in there, that can drive sales, that can drive awards, that drives big purchases or relatively big purchases. And that's one group. There's another group, and I'm on the board, so I'll pat his back, right? Like Sunscreen, right? That's been around 20 years, and in my opinion is amazing. But that's not driving big sales in the business.
There's no market attached to it.
Yeah, it just doesn't lead to that. But what it does do is provide a platform for local filmmakers, and slightly broader than local too, right? But provides a platform for artists to put their work out there, to get some external feedback and validation, and serves as a launching pad, is not just a confidence builder, but like objective launching pad to help grow, and it builds the community, and there's so much value there. But if you treat it like it's a different, if you approach it like it's a different festival, you're not gonna get the value you need, and you're gonna lose, right? So you have to just be objective and honest about what each festival can provide you. And then there's so many great ones, big and small, genre ones, like the Overlook.
You mentioned Fantastic Fest.
Fantastic Fest. Was it the New Orleans Film Festival is amazing, right? No, it's probably not where you go to get a $20 million sale on a film. Yeah,
but there's some prestige there, and there's networking. And,
there is.
And again, I think so feedback is what people. It drives me nuts when you see filmmakers come in and they don't want to hear feedback, or they don't want to take the time to see what the audience actually thought of their film, or they take offense at it. Like, no, you didn't make a movie in a vacuum. Like it's out there now. You have to now accept that criticism,
and you need some comfort. Like the external validation can't be what you build, and this isn't anything in life, right? But like a thing I've said is I wrote something that won an award at Raindance Film Festival. and we submitted it to 10 places. And in 5 of them, it made the finals or won Rain Dance. And in 5, it didn't make it past. It was rejected outright. I was like, okay. It's just, it's not for everybody. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. I'm happy with it. And in the end, that's what matters. I made it economically responsibly. And so great. No,
absolutely. Stephen, it's been fascinating. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you maybe I should thank your wife for choosing Tampa Bay and bringing you here. We're really looking forward not only to interacting with you guys at Sunscreen. It's one of my favorite festivals in the area. I think in all the state of Florida. I mean, it's just such a good time to meet filmmakers. Again, you're probably not getting a $20 million sale, but you're going to interact with so many
it does a lot, and great creative
people.
Partnerships come out of it. It's I think festivals, that one in particular and ones like it, are really, really valuable.
And incredibly important to a community as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm very excited to see, I'll be on set, I think on the 24th for Feather Detective to come out and see that. And I'm sure we can work some deals out, hopefully in the future, to bring more filming to Tampa Bay.
That's
I'm
my goal.
Hoping, man.
Yeah, I want to make as much as I can here.
Yeah.
So if anybody in the state
I get it. If you can roll out of bed and be on set in 20
man.
minutes, like that's the dream.
Yeah. To close, the filmmaker I'm trying to woo to my studio in Dallas, part of my pitch is like, you don't have to find a babysitter for your cats, man.
That's right.
Like, you can come here and I'll give you a clicker to the studio, show up, make your movie. You're incredible. You'll make an incredible movie. Do it at home.
That's fabulous.
That's what I want to do here.
So let's wrap this out. Where can people learn more about Talon if you want to plug anything?
Yeah. We have a website I don't update, so it's on Instagram. It's at Talon Entertainment. And we're pretty active on there, and I think we do a pretty good job of responding to people who message us and whatnot.
Right. Well, I appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, we'll be right back. And welcome back. That was an awesome interview. Actually, it was one of my favorite interviews we've done so far. It was just so exciting. I love the history of SNL. I love his family history. I love that he's gone back to school now to hone his writing. I love his approach to finding scripts and projects to invest in. Just a fascinating conversation. What do you ladies think?
Can you imagine being on SNL, well, not on camera on SNL, but literally being in Studio 8H when you're in high school and catching cue cards and doing all of that? And oh my gosh, I'm so jealous.
Going to the after parties. And just, he came into it later as he got older and was able to work on the set. But, his dad was on set from the very first episode of SNL, 40-year career. That's amazing to me.
That's wild. And then he said his cousin took over for his dad as prop master. So it has stayed a Demmler position for a while.
Yeah, a real showbiz family.
Absolutely.
And I think it shows just in his passion for movies. What else did you take away?
Well, like you said, I thought it was really cool that he had been there. His dad had been there from episode 1, because that is honestly one of the better eras of SNL. But I would love to sit through a whole masterclass with Stephen, because whether he's talking about the financing side and producing and putting a package together, or talking about the creative side of things, he does look at it holistically. He does again and again, like every week we come back to it. He looks for that story and focusing on that, finding a good story more than anything, whether that's he's on the creative side or the financing side.
One of the questions I was left with is, how rare is a creative financier for movies? Have you run into people before where they split their kind of energy?
I think it's rare in the fact that there's people that are probably more invested in the ROI, return on investment, and protecting their money than they are on propping up a creative film that might not do well financially, but is culturally or creatively important to make. And I don't think he goes too far in that direction, but I think he's the right balance as far as what you want in a producer and an investor, which I do think is rare. And
it goes into his NYU class where he's using, people that he's peers with. He's taking their scripts and making them work.
Yeah, I mean, how many opportunities do you have to sit in a classroom with your peers and like, wow, man, you're really doing something creative. I can actually help you. I wish we were all that lucky, but that is really rare. Like, you don't have that opportunity too often to sit in a classroom and be like, oh, there's someone literally sitting next to me who could finance my film.
Yeah. And that's what he said on the other side, was that he had NYU almost vet all these people to begin with. He was just pulling from who NYU deemed quality writers. And so he's surrounded by talent.
Yeah, they're both benefiting from that. Sounds like.
They absolutely are. And another
Symbiotic.
part of the conversation I found really fascinating was his approach to film festivals, and is it worth going to this film festival or that film festival, and the reasons behind going to those types of film festivals. Hillary, you have a wide background in film festivals. You've worked at the Savannah Film Festival, Palm Beach, Sundance, of course.
Yep.
What are some takeaways, both from what he said and your own experiences?
Well, he was 100% right about that. There's definitely a film festival strategy with what festivals you're submitting to, which film festivals you're actually able to attend and be part of. It's not what some people think about just collecting laurels and then throwing 100 laurels on your poster. That is not going to give you the same value that going to the right festival is. So it's not about going to every festival, but which ones are the most meaningful for you and for your film, and where are you going to make those connections and take your film from there.
There's certainly nothing wrong with submitting to smaller local festivals, but it's the idea that, this is the festival that I'm going to be discovered at, right? And it's coming in it with the wrong expectations. And you're right, the shotgun effect, where I'm going to throw as many laurels on my one sheet poster as I possibly can, when most of them haven't been heard by anyone outside of the community in which it's held, that doesn't help you at all. In fact, I hate to say it, but it makes you look almost desperate in some cases. And that's not a good place to be as far as positioning your film to do as good as it can.
It cheapens it.
In a way. But there is nothing cheap about supporting local festivals. I want to make that very, very clear.
Oh, no, not at all.
Gasparilla and Sunscreen are two local fests, or two of several local fests, but there's a ton of value going there. But go there with the right expectations. You're probably not going to sell, I'm not going to say it's going to be impossible, you're probably not going to sell your film at a festival like that. What you can do is be present, get meaningful feedback from peers, and hopefully you're in a position where you can actually take that in, reflect on it, and maybe tweak something, and be there to network and meet people who are as passionate about film as you are. That's the importance of local festivals. And then on the national stage, if you go to a Sundance, that's a totally different atmosphere. I mean, how many years have you worked for Sundance?
I've worked for Sundance for 2 different years. And it is a different vibe than the smaller festivals. Still a great opportunity to connect and network, but definitely a different experience in terms of people trying to sell their movies. Like you said, like if it's a smaller regional festival, maybe you use that more for education and learning and meeting other people, going to panels, developing in some areas where maybe you don't have some skills, and, just exposure.
Yeah. So. And you've got to look at the festival too. Does it have a market attached? Because that's a totally different type of festival with almost like a side festival going on, where it's just the sale and acquisition of projects. And then there's festivals like Sundance, where there's not necessarily a traditional market attached to it, but buyers are there in force to try to get on the upswing the most popular movies coming out of Sundance. And there's local festivals where there might be a buyer here and there, but they're not really there to acquire the next, lightning in a bottle type movie where this is going to light the world on fire, right? They're there for different reasons. And it's usually for educational purposes, right? There may be panelists or guests or judges, and there's a lot of value in interacting with them, but go to the festival with the right intentions and be strategic. I think that was one of the parts he mentioned, is like, figure out your festival path, but do it in a strategic way where, hey, my film can succeed at these places, and don't waste your time trying to get into festivals where you either don't have a chance, or I see this all the time, people submitting to festivals where if you look at their catalog of movies they've played over the last couple of years, like there's nothing similar to what you made. So why are you spending the time, money, and effort to send it in when you know that's not a festival that's going to take a movie like that, whatever that might be, right?
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of strategy behind it. And I hate to see people spend thousands of dollars on festival submissions when they probably should have been focusing on 5 or 6.
Yeah. Well, I was glad he brought that up for our younger or more amateur filmmakers, that the external validation shouldn't be the whole point. So like, go there, get your feedback, and take it, and don't let your, dream project remain set in stone if no one's enjoying it. Like what he said was, people don't make movies in a vacuum. And so it's like, why are you blocking out everything people are telling you about your movie?
And not all criticism is valid. Not all criticism is good, right? I think that's something to internalize and take with you when you go to these film festivals. It doesn't mean discount it, but think about it. Is it actually applicable? Does it work? And if it does work, and if it's something you can learn from, then go back and tweak something, or put that into practice in your next movie. I mean, that's really where I think a lot of the value comes in from those smaller fests.
And it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
great opportunity to get your film in front of real people and see how an audience reacts to it,
Yes.
hear when they're laughing, see when they're going to cry, if they're
Yeah.
going to cry, and then use that, for your benefit.
Well, it is Christmas, ladies. So let's end on a happier note than dashing everyone's festival dreams. Stephen had a great career at SNL. His family, just part of the legacy and the tapestry of what makes SNL SNL. Do you guys have a favorite cast?
I don't know if I have a favorite cast. I think the original era, like I said, is one of the better ones. My favorite cast member would probably have to be Mike Myers. I know I've told some Mike Myers stories before, but when I was a student at SCAD, our improv troupe was able to have like a private improv lesson with him when he came down for the Savannah Film
That's too
Festival,
cool.
which was insane. Yeah, like such a rare opportunity.
Yeah.
So I was really grateful that he took the time to do that with the students. So that's my answer, is Mike Myers.
What about you?
I have never been a huge SNL watcher, but I have a lot of nostalgic feelings about my friends coming in on Monday and them loving SNL. So like when I think SNL, I think my friend Annalise. And so I think overall, just knowing that it's still going and that people that have been diehard fans or loyalists still get to consume it, that's what makes me happy about it.
I do like the original cast, particularly when Bill Murray and Eddie Murphy joined the cast. I think that was just lightning in a bottle. I mean, it was how many talented people can you pack into one room? And just the careers that all of those people went on to have is amazing to me. There's some middling years in there. I just kind of forget about it. I actually think the current cast is pretty good, and I think it's more because of the topicalness of the sketches, and we're in a moment in time where they can be, I don't want to say jaded, but they can be really pointed in their political or social criticisms, and I think that is to their benefit. Whereas you look at the older SNL cast, it was almost an absurdist approach to a lot of the sketches, and it's not to say there wasn't political things going on. I mean, you have everything from Watergate to Gerald R. Ford constantly falling down. I mean, there was a lot of punches at
OJ's
political
in that
elitists.
time.
Oh yeah, OJ's, yeah. Notoriously, the OJ jokes during the Weekend Update was what got Norm Macdonald fired. But
If you compare it to the early days of SNL, you look at like Dan Aykroyd playing Jimmy Carter, like he's got a freaking mustache. Like it's not the same level of like edginess. It's a different type of characterization.
It's always been fun though, but I think they're more topical than ever before. So with that, we'll wrap this up, ladies. Again, Merry Christmas. I hope you guys have a great holiday. And for those at home, whatever you celebrate, enjoy the holiday season. Where can they learn more about us, Miss Birdie Doyle?
We are Loose Framing Podcast. You can stream us anywhere you stream podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube, and don't forget to follow Film Tampa Bay across all platforms.
And with that, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.